What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis. Over 10 years of FPV experience on the channel, and today this is one of those videos for the absolute beginner. This is also one of the reasons kind of why I started Drone Camps RC originally with my store, to help people sort of walk their way into flying drones. And now we're into FPV for a long time now on the channel. You can go back and watch a lot of exciting videos. But today, for about $200, you can get started flying FPV, and this might be the best $200 you spend in your process of your journey and learning FPV. This is the total experience for multiple flight modes. We have adaptive mode flight mode, which is an optical flow type flight mode, which is very similar to your standard DJI drone or Autel drone. It sees the ground below it with a camera, and as long as you're not on a flat white surface, it will hold its position, kind of like GPS hold. This little guy does not have GPS or GPS return to home, but it does have an adaptive optical flow that changes the way it flies around its environment. And I'm going to show you that in this video. We're also going to talk about the basics of FPV and learning how to get into FPV. That is the biggest point of this video. So if you start with this product, I think that originally I started out flying quadcopter with years ago a little tiny Traxxas that had zero stabilization, zero position hold and altitude hold, which this has, which is great. So the original Traxxas that I had would kind of float like it was skating on ice, and I crashed it all over the living room in my house. Now, it was only about this big, which is very close to the same size as this drone, but everything is in the box here. You get the radio, you get the 5.8 gigahertz goggles, which shows you the real-time FPV view from this little guy. And this little guy fits in the palm of your hand. It is a brushless, or excuse me, brush motor. It has sort of these little tiny motors on here, and they're super quiet. I've talked about brushed motors before. Some of the more experienced guys might be like, oh man, there's not brushless motors on this, but brushed motors indoors, they're easier to fly for the beginners. The only thing is they do get a little bit of hair from your carpet trapped up in the motors every once in a while, and if you have some long hair, someone in the house with long hair, you have to kind of pull that out every once in a while. It gets wrapped around the propellers, but once you do that, you're off and flying again. So this little drone gets about 5 minutes flight time on each battery. It does come with 2 batteries in the box. I also get a stick protector in here, some accessories, some extra props, and this little guy does not have BetaFlight on here. BetaFlight is our standard in the hobby for hooking up a USB cable to the quad's port and flight controller. This has a self-sustained flight controller with BetaFpv's own software on here, its own iOS on here, or its own OS. So it has little tiny, I believe they're around 40 millimeter props. They are push-on props, no bolts on top, camera with a protective shroud around it, and plenty of view for the FPV experience. You also can control the OSD inside the goggles with the radio, so you can change things around on the screen, which is kind of cool, and you can change the LEDs. And I believe this is on 25 milliwatt, which is not a lot, but I've flown about a mile out on 25 milliwatt. It's kind of crazy what you can get away with 25 milliwatt. So the basics of this kit are that you need to start out charging everything with the USB port that's included on each device. This has around a 2000 milliamp built-in battery here, and this radio has a built-in battery as well. So charge everything up, use your little micro USB charger that comes along with the kit as well, and charge up the 2 stick batteries. They look like a little stick of gum, and they're over there on the charger right now. But we're gonna charge up everything in the box, and we're gonna do our first flight together. I want you to see the different flight modes that this comes with and explain it to you in a simple people speak type of instructional. So let's go ahead and get started with the CETUS, and let me show you first of all adaptive mode. We'll show you normal mode, and then we'll show you sport mode outside. Here we go. Okay guys, so the first day you receive this in the mail, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go ahead and open up the box, and like I said before, everything is chargeable by USB, so that's super great. This is the little transmitter that it comes along with. It has an arm switch right here. SA is your arm switch. And your flight mode switch, I believe, was on this side. It's a 3-position switch, SC. We're going to double check on that when we do a flight test for you and your first flight with your CETUS. But we have throttle on the left, we have yaw, and this is pitch and roll. We have the power button here and the charge port down here. You can also hook this up to an FPV simulator, which is a big question that a lot of you guys have. You want to know if this flies with a simulator for FPV flying on your TV or your computer? Yes, this will work with FPV simulators, and you can practice on your TV or computer before you start crashing this little guy. Now, this is the CETUS itself, and when I first got this drone, I looked at the bottom and I noticed that there was something strange here. Most of these in the FPV community, we call them tiny whoops, and this little guy is kind of a classic tiny whoop. It does look a lot like the Emax Tiny Hawk, and some people would be asking me in this video, should I get the Tiny Hawk 2 ready to fly, or should I get the CETUS? Well, this one has something secret on here that the Tiny Hawk does not have. When you're flying the Tiny Hawk, it will drift in space, and some people say that they can't get the sticks calibrated to make it stay in one spot. That's because it doesn't have optical flow. This little guy has a little tiny camera on the very bottom, and if I zoom into this real close, check that out. This is optical flow, one of the first tiny whoop style indoor drones that I've ever seen with an optical flow camera. So BetaFpv is onto something here. They also have plug and play motors that's what we call them in the FPV community, because they come on and off with the push of a little harness right there. So they're also color coded and they rotate a certain direction. This one is a right turn rear setup. So we do not have a props out configuration on this one, but it is very easy to replace a motor if they do go bad. And you can see those sensors on the bottom right there. We also have a bind button right here. This little tiny gold button right here is the bind button. If this becomes unbound from your radio, you will turn this on and press that for a couple seconds, and you will see the light start flashing green 3 times in a row. And on the back of the transmitter, there's actually a bind button. After it's flashing green, you press the bind button and it will rebind to your drone, and the light should turn a solid blue. Now, also in the box, you do get a CETUS FPV Kit instruction manual, and it has a pretty nice listing of all the contents in here, how to work things, how to change the on-screen display and the LEDs using the sticks, which is pretty cool. It also gives you a description of how to work with 5.8 gigahertz video. There are several different bands and channels that you can switch to. So if you're flying with friends, you can fly up with around 6 or 7 friends, and you can change to different channels, which is cool because you can do indoor FPV racing. Sometimes pre-COVID times we had indoor sort of races at bars with these tiny whoops, and it's a lot of fun. So hang out with your bros and the girls, and everybody races, and you have some really cool gates you can make with LEDs and all kinds of cool stuff. But this is the basics of first person FPV. When you turn on the goggles, you should see some type of display. If you don't, you can press the search button. There is a power switch here on the side of the goggles. It has the USB port right there for charging, and your search button is right in the middle there. It does have an S on it, and you press that S and it will scroll through all the bands and channels, and there are 8 channels on each band. So this is basic information for you guys if you've never heard it before, but we have multiple flight modes here. We have adaptation mode, which is also adaptive mode. It's going to change its level as it goes over things. It'll go up and down, like over your couch and your coffee table, which is super cool. Normal mode is a little bit faster, and we have sport mode, which allows you to fly outdoors with a little more aggressive tilt. If it's windy outside, this little guy will have a hard time flying in a lot of wind. So you want to fly in sport mode. It's not the same as acro mode. So if you want acro mode, honestly, you should probably pick up something like the Gep RC Tiny Go. That one also has a pair of goggles that are 5.8, and you can record your videos on that one. You can also record 4K video on board, but that one's around $300. This one is $200 without being able to record your videos. And I know that's a big bummer for some people, but you can also buy little tiny external DVRs that will record 5.8 video. So that's something I'll try to put a link down below for you if you're looking to buy this kit. So also in the box you do get a stick protector which goes right on top of the sticks. When you put this in your FPV drone case, you want to put these on, and they seem to be silicone, which is kind of nice, and they'll keep your sticks from getting broken during transport. Very, very nice. I have had sticks broken in transport before, so that's a nice option. You also get these 1S 300 milliamp batteries, and they'll get us about 5 minutes flight time per battery. They do have this new connector on here. This is called a BT 2.0 connector, and it is chargeable on this little tiny charger that you get. Now, what's interesting is you don't see any display on here, but watch this. If we plug in this battery, there's a little port right there. It says test. So we'll plug this in, check that out. Now you can see the voltage that this battery currently has. If you get below the safe charge voltage, this quad will auto land, which is also neat, so that you don't destroy your batteries. If you see these batteries start to swell up or start to balloon out, that means they're getting bad. So you want to get rid of those batteries. Typically what we do is we cut the cord off and put them in a bucket of salt water. But here you don't really have a cord, so you want to safely dispose of these because they can catch on fire in the trash. You definitely wouldn't want to do that, but 5 minutes flight time is not bad per battery. They take about 10 minutes to charge up with this USB-C type cable. You can charge it from the wall, and you can also charge from a USB battery bank, which is cool. So plug that into your battery bank and charge in the field or on the road. You also get a prop remover tool, and you get some extra props. These are just push-on props, which you will use this little tool to take off any broken props, but it's not likely that you're going to break props. You also get a little support card, which has QR codes on here to take you to their Facebook, Instagram, and their own YouTube channel, as well as links to this product manual on BetaFpv's website. Okay, before you get started, you've already charged up everything here. You've charged up your goggles, you've charged up your transmitter, and you've charged up your battery. So now we're ready to go ahead and turn everything on and do our first flight. One thing I wanted to show you is that also in the box, there is this little tiny adapter. It has an 8-pin harness on this side, which plugs into the flight controller at the very back of the drone. If you look really closely right here, there's a little tiny black harness right there, and these pins plug straight into that, and that gives you USB access to the flight controller. Now, there is not an option for Betaflight right now. It does not plug into Betaflight. I did test it for you, but for some reason it's not working. So I believe that BetaFpv may release this for PC software for guys with PCs. You might be able to go in and do firmware updates on this drone in the future. So that would make this future-proof, which would be really nice. So the first thing you're going to do when turning everything on is press and hold on the middle button there for about 3 seconds, and you should hear this beep and go blue. Make sure your switches are facing at the all the way away from you position. And this is interesting because it has so many different flight modes on here. We're going to start out in adaptive mode, and we're going to do a hover test. When you start out flying FPV quadcopter for the first time, even if you're super experienced and you've flown commercially camera drones, which as some guys move over into FPV and do, I would suggest learning how to fly this line of sight first, meaning not using your goggles. So fly a couple batteries first and get used to the stick orientation, throttle, yaw, roll, and pitch here, and your multiple flight modes. So we're going to go ahead and plug in the battery and make sure that your drone is flat as quick as possible. And you'll see that, get a little distance here, you'll see that it is solid blue when it has a connection. Now to arm the motors, we're going to use this switch here. Pull it towards you, SA switch will arm the motors, and that will disarm them. It has something on here we call air mode that has about a 15% throttle constant, so that if you go to the bottom of the stick, it doesn't fall to the ground. That way it flies smoothly at even the lowest bit of throttle. In the old days, if you went throttle down, the motors would stop and it would drop like a rock. So they want to avoid that by doing that for you. So when you do take off, you want to be in your adaptive mode, and that will have optical flow active. So once the camera sees the ground, you want to set it on a surface where it's not like a solid white surface. Something like this would be fine, or your carpet. The next thing you're going to do is turn on your goggles. There's a little switch on the side right here. Push it forward like that. They were already on. And if you don't see anything right away, you can push the search function on the side. Press and hold the S, and you'll see this little guy pop up, and it'll go through all the bands and channels, and actually pretty quick. And to get this off the screen, you go ahead and press S again, and it should turn it off. I may have pressed the wrong button. We'll press S again. We'll press it and hold just for another quick demonstration. And it should swing back around to the channel. So now we can go back to the flight modes. Now, on the bottom right, you'll see the flight modes. I'm gonna just zoom in here to the screen a little bit for you. Make this bigger for you. Now you have, on the left-hand side of the screen, you should have the voltage. Looks like 3.68 volt. It should be 4.2 on a full charge. I've had this battery on for a little bit. Right in the middle of the screen, you see disarm. And to the bottom right, you see that we're in the adaptive mode. Now, the switch on the left right here, SB, if we switch that one more time, that should put it into normal mode. And now we're in sport mode. So that's for outdoors and flying in a little bit of wind. Just makes it a little more aggressive pitch so that you can continue flying in wind. If you try to fly in wind and adaptive mode and normal mode, it's not going to be a good experience. Now, you also have a switch on the right-hand side. This SC switch changes it from fast to slow and medium, which is super cool. And for some reason that switched my channel, but this SC switch will switch it from fast, normal to slow modes, which is really, really cool. So I'm gonna press S here and hold it again, and it should go through those channels. Press and hold, look at that, super quick, searching, and that's how easy it is to find the FPV channel that this quad's on. And also you can change channels using these two arrows here, change channels and bands. If you want to change and you're flying with a friend, you don't want to be on the same channel because you'll have interference. All right guys, we're ready to fly the drone now. So we're gonna go ahead and plug in the battery, make sure that it's on a nice flat surface before we take off. That's gonna be super important. And once we are in adaptive mode, you'll see that the lights turn solid when it's totally loaded. And now they're totally solid. And for our first flight with your CETUS, you want to make sure that you're facing the camera away from you and the rear of the drone is facing you, so that right is right and left is left, forward is forward and backwards is backwards. And on the yaw, if you push left, it will turn the nose to the left and right to the right. And this is your throttle up and down. So we're just going to practice a really quick circuit, and then we're going to do some forward flying. That's what you do first, a square circuit. Then we're going to practice flying nose in, and then we're going to practice this forward flight stuff. So it's pretty cool. We're going to show you the adaptive response for this little optical flow setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and come up into a hover. The SA switch, we're going to go ahead and arm it here. And you can see the LEDs turn colors. We're going to come up about half throttle, and you'll see it auto take off. And you can see it's kind of stabilizing itself. So right now, this is hands-off flying. I don't even have to fly it. It's holding its position and it's doing altitude hold. So you have two things here, altitude hold and position hold, which is super cool. So now I'm gonna go ahead and show you kind of like a Jedi trick. I'm gonna put my hand underneath it and watch it rise up. Now it's gonna come automatically back down, close to the position it was, and hold its spot. So they call it adaptive because when you fly over surfaces, it's going to go down or up as you fly over things. So pressing forward on the stick, I'm just going to show you an example of this. It's rising over the couch right there. And when I come back down to the couch, it sees that surface. So it's maintaining its altitude above that surface so that it doesn't hit it. Now off the end of the coffee table right here, it's going down. And now watch when we fly back above the coffee table. It's gaining altitude by itself to be above that surface. And if I let go of the sticks, if you're in trouble, in this mode, you can let go of the sticks and it'll just kind of hover there. Now this is strictly for indoor flying, but this won't work quite as good outside. So you have a lot of wind and stuff outside, and that really affects this little drone. So first thing you're gonna do in this adaptive mode, we're gonna do a square circuit. Now the battery's dying, so it wants to auto land on us. And you want to turn this SA switch to the forward position, and that will disarm it. So we need to charge up a battery real quick, and we'll do a square circuit. Okay, so we're gonna do a square circuit now, and this will really help you. You can practice this over and over, but I'm just gonna demonstrate it really quick. We're gonna go ahead and go into normal mode, and we're still flying line of sight without the goggles. So we're gonna come up off the coffee table, and we're gonna go to our first, what we call a waypoint. This will be sort of an imaginary waypoint. We're gonna hover there in space. So practice this hovering in one space. Now we're gonna go to our next imaginary point, which is right out in front of us, which is waypoint number 2. Hover right there. And using the right stick only, guys, a little bit of throttle will also help. This is practicing keeping it level as well. If it drifts one way, push right or left. You can see mine's drifting a little bit. It could probably use a little bit of a calibration, but in normal mode, it's gonna do that. So we're holding position number 3 here. Now we're gonna push back on the stick, bring the drone to waypoint number 4, and you're gonna hover right there. And now back to the start. The next thing you can do is do this in opposite fashion, a little bit faster. Waypoint number 2, waypoint number 3, and waypoint number 4, and back to the beginning. And now you've done it one way and you've done it the other. So reverse and forward. So bring it back over into the center of the room. And now what I want you to do is, using your yaw stick, which is the left stick and the throttle, spin the drone around facing you. Now, if you're in normal mode, this is gonna be challenging. Learning how to fly nose in is extremely difficult for most beginners. You might fly it into the wall, but you have prop guards on here to help with that. So we're gonna go ahead and press right, and you'll see it go to the left. See it go to the left, and look how much altitude change I'm having to do with the throttle. Now when I push left, it goes right. So everything is reversed now. So if I push forward on the stick, it's gonna come toward me. And if I pull back, it's gonna go away. So this is a really good skill for you to practice. Nose in flying is super important. So what we're gonna recommend next for your training with the CETUS is actually walking around behind the drone. It's gonna sort of simulate being in the FPV goggles, but you're just kind of following the drone around the house. And this is one of the things that I've demonstrated before in the Gap RC Tiny Go tutorial and review. So this is really, really helpful before you get started with your FPV goggles. So let's go ahead and arm the drone, come up into a hover, and I'm gonna use this adaptive takeoff. It's gonna auto take off here when I get to about half stick, and it'll come up in a hover, and it's watching the ground. We can also use the right switch to go a little faster. Let's switch that all the way forward. Now, see, we have a little faster forward flight, and we're just gonna walk around behind this little guy and follow it around the house. And if you wanna really fly faster, you can go into normal mode, switch one more switch forward, and now you don't have that sort of optical flow on the bottom active. It disables optical flow at this point, so we're just gonna fly around, keep following this little guy, and this is kind of your simulated FPV perspective, which is really, really cool. So practice that a few times, and eventually, after maybe a battery or so, you'll be ready for FPV. Alright guys, welcome back from after the flight test. So hopefully this kind of helps you get kick-started into our hobby of FPV and it becomes your hobby. There's a ton of support out there. If you want to join our Facebook group, we actually have a Facebook group that you can join and ask questions to more experienced pilots. It's called the Drone Camps FPV community on Facebook. We're also on Instagram at Drone Camps RC. This is starting out around $159 on the BetaFpv website, so I think that's a pretty fair price for what you get here. And then also around $200 on Banggood's website. I will put that link down below. You guys can check out the links down below. And if you have any questions about getting into FPV, or you're already on that journey, or any questions at all, please do put your comments down below or questions, and we'll try to answer them here on the channel, or our guys in the community will try to get back to you as well. So either way you go, have fun out there with this. This is a great journey into FPV, and one of the easiest, honestly the easiest ways to just kickstart right into making FPV videos. If you're tired of the same old drone shots that are straight ahead and stabilized and kind of flying like a battleship and you're bored of that, FPV is the way to go. So I encourage you to give it a shot. Please do subscribe on the channel, guys. I'm Justin Davis. Take care. This is the BetaFpv CETUS ready to fly. I'll see you on the next one.